If you don't go back and shine a light on it and you're not exploring your own demons and exposing those things, then you're never going to get yourself better. And if you're not better yourself, how are you ever going to be able to help anyone?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Reesa and I'm your host. We are talking to real families about real stories here on The Real Family Eats, where we've got food for thought and thoughtful food. So let's eat. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. I am so excited for our episode today because I have Bubba who is joining us. Thank you, Bubba, for being here. I'm so excited to hear your story and your recipe.
Well, thank you for letting me in your kitchen.
Yes, absolutely welcome. So for anybody who doesn't know you, can you introduce yourself for us?
Well, my name is Bubba Startz. I am a songwriter. I am a podcaster. I'm also a dad. I started the Scene Projects podcast network, really in the last 6 months. But last year, I quit my job welding. I just couldn't work for somebody else anymore. And that set us on this whole crazy path of the podcasting world. And with everything kind of going as it is, mainstream media kind of failing, and all of us seeing that in real time, I realized that being a musician, I've worked around radio and TV a lot, and saw
Okay.
podcasting as that next evolution of what media is. So just set out to figure it out, right? Let's figure this out, and then beyond that, now we're starting coaching and things like that. But I am a podcaster through and through, and just really happy to be here with you today.
Wonderful. I love that so much. Okay. So before we get to your story, which I know, you've probably got stories for days and we could probably talk for hours. Tell us though, what recipe are you sharing with parents today and why did you choose this one?
Well, I call it Bubba's butt kicking chili. It could have just as easily been my wife's name up there because we kind of work the same thing. But we live
Okay.
here in South Dakota, and it is cold, cold, cold in the winter time. So chili is a staple for us, probably twice a month sometimes in those cold months, just to be a nice filling meal and be that comfort food.
Mm, I love that. And I hear you saying, South Dakota in cold, cold. I'm going to be completely honest with you. So I'm in Southern California. So our cold, I mean, it feels cold to us, but realistically, you'd probably be in shorts. But my husband loves a good chili. So it doesn't matter if it's 100 degrees outside. He's like, let's make some chili. So, just to put that out there. So I love it. And so I'm excited. I haven't tried exactly this recipe. So tell us give me an overview of the steps, and then I'll get mixing while we chat.
Awesome. Well, with any South Dakota meal, the basis of that is going to be beef. We have more cattle in South Dakota than we do people. So a lot of beef producers, pork producers as well. But we actually have my wife's uncle raises cows and has a lot that he feeds them at.
Wow.
And then her other uncle butchers them. So we're very fortunate to get, a cow that we could have gone and named ourselves. I don't do that because that would be a little awkward, but we have, locally raised beef that we use. Pound of ground beef to start, and browning that up is kind of the first step to everything. And then everything
Mhm.
else just kind of comes out of a can and goes right into the crock pot, and it's super easy. It's why my wife loves making it.
Wonderful. Well, I can put things in a pot. I feel like I can totally do that. So, okay, I will get going. And while we're doing this, I'd love to kind of jump into your story because your parenting journey maybe doesn't quite look like every traditional, like you said, beaver cleaver kind of story, which is what we're here to talk about. So I'd love for you to kind of start and tell us a little bit about your parenting journey, some of the challenges that you've had to encounter and navigate in your world.
Well, I don't know that anyone has that leave it to beaver family anymore, right? We live in an age of blended families and divorce and remarriage and step kids and step brothers and sisters and step parents. And
Mm-hmm.
that is kind of where our story begins. My first son was born in 2012. His
Okay.
mother had already had a another child, so we were already kind of blended. And shortly after my son was born, we broke up, and
Okay.
I've been kind of in a custody battle with for visitation with him for the last 12 years.
Wow.
Now things are more settled than they were in the first 6 years of his life, but I went a pretty good amount of time in the first 6 years of his life. Also through choices of mine, I did a couple years in prison. I also spent a year in Mexico before that, because I didn't want to go to prison. So, 3 years of my son's life, that I was completely gone for. And the rest of that time, while I was seeing him sporadically, it was still just mired in court cases and appearances and all of that. So my relationship with my oldest boy is I wouldn't say tenuous now. We've since I got out of prison and we've been reestablishing that relationship. It's been
Mm-hmm.
a lot better. But now he has two siblings that are from another relationship that I'm also no longer in. And those two kids are raised by my now current wife. And we yeah, so we've got three kids. All the kids
Mm-hmm.
have different DNA. Even my oldest boy, I adopted my middle son Mick, so he's not my blood, but he's been my son. I was with his mother before he was ever born. So
Okay.
I legally adopted him when my ex-wife and I got divorced. So I've had primary custody of my youngest two for the last, to be 7 years now. 2018, I got out of prison and
Wow.
have had them full time. In that, few short months out of prison, I met my wife. We actually met because she was a correctional officer at the prison I was in, but obviously didn't start dating there. This isn't one of those love and lockup kind of situations.
Oh my
But
goodness.
we got together shortly thereafter. I say she fell in love with the songwriter side of me, right? She came and saw a show when I was performing, and she's a big country music fan. So I think she fell in
Okay.
love with that guitar and that voice, and then she was kind of willing to deal with all the rest of the stuff because of that. And
Yeah.
it's been a lot, right? I mean, even just getting the backstory, you're like, oh wow, there's a lot to unpack, right?
There's meat there, right? As you know, as
There's
I'm making some meat here, for sure. Which I mean,
well,
I just want to pause though in the fact that it sounds like you found kind of the key into her heart with your music, though. It sounds
it helps, right? It
like.
helps to have a little bit of talent in your back pocket for those situations because honestly, there was no reason. My wife is also 10 years younger than me. She was 22, just graduated college. She had her whole life ahead of her. And I landed on her with an instant family of three, two kids that I just got primary custody of, and one son that I was, fighting to get back into his life. And she really
Mm-hmm.
took that out on, and I can't wait for the book that she writes years down the road here of how she took on this huge challenge and just has continued to shine through that. And I mean, it's not perfect. We're not perfect people. It has been nothing but bumps and mountains to climb
Yeah.
and a lot of screaming matches and a lot of having to understand each other, because at the same time, while I respect what she took on, I also have to look at it like, well, you took this on though, right? Like
Mm.
you chose this. You knew what you were
Yeah.
getting into. It's not like I came at you and was hiding all of these children. I was
Right.
there and like, hey, this is what my life looks like. If you want to be a
Mm-hmm.
part of this, like I love you. I would love to, but also I totally respect you if you want to go. Right? You're
Right. Yeah.
22 and you have you could be anything you want to be. Why would you want to be, married to a felon fresh out of prison on parole who has, custody of a 3 and a 2 year old? I mean, my kids weren't even able to wipe their own butts when we got together. And then
Mm-hmm.
as when I got out of prison, their mom kind of took that as a, or, their biological mother, my ex-wife, decided that this was her ticket to freedom. And really, for the last 5 years, we've had almost zero contact with her besides when we try to reach out. But
Oh,
now
wow.
you get into a situation where my two children don't have any idea who this woman is, right? That they
Mm-hmm.
know that their mom, my wife, my current wife, is mom, but that she didn't birth them.
Yeah.
And, so difficult conversations with, 8, 9, and 12-year olds to try to say, hey, we're not just going to tell you that everything's rosy and try to do this. Like, you come from a messy background, especially for my younger two, both of your parents are addicts, right? Both of your parents have done prison time, your blood,
Mm-hmm.
your DNA. And, we're not going to hide that from you. And I
Yeah.
refuse to kind of hide my past from them and the story that I gave them. Now,
Hmm.
fortunately, they were young enough where they don't remember dad not being around. They don't have
Okay.
any of those memories. And even my son yesterday, we were out for a walk and my 9-year old, was like, well, dad, we don't need to talk about bad stuff, because I was kind of sharing about jail and the different things. And I was like, look, buddy, like, it's not bad stuff, right? It's part of my
Hmm.
story. It's just stuff, right? Like, it's just stuff.
Yeah.
It was part of our story. It's part of all of our story because I gave that to you. But I don't want you to have to deal with these things emotionally 20 years down the road when your own life is a mess and you don't know why.
Hmm. Can I pause you there for a moment? Because I think that's such an interesting and change, as far as just that mindset and that shift in perspective, because I find that, there are a lot of parents out there where coming from a great place, a well-meaning place, feel like I need to keep this from you. I need to protect you from from this message or from these bad things like you said. So I'm so curious, could you tell me more about, like, how did you make that shift, or what maybe kind of gave you enough of that insight and that awareness to say, I want to be honest with you, and I want to be kind of, it sounds like, transparent, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Exactly. And maybe it's a generational thing, right? Where I think a lot of parents that are, I'll be 39. Well, I'll already be 39 by the time this comes out. So I'm going to pretend I'm 39 already. And and it's just because we all know that we've kind of been lied to, right? We've all kind of
Mm,
been living in some crazy matrix, and not to get political about it, but I think a lot of things over the last year have been exposed. I think a lot of what, the mainstream media and just television and all of those things in general, like we, reference Leave It to Beaver, not that that show's been on the air in, half a century, but that life for most for I would say all people, like nobody lives a life like that. They're sitcoms for a reason. It's
yeah.
entertainment. That's not real. But I think that previous generations thought that maybe that was real. And then you start to look at yourself and go, but my life's a mess. Like, I don't want to
Mm,
share that with anyone. I don't want to be and to be seen from the outside as that, right? To be seen as a
yeah.
mess. But if everyone shares their stuff and you realize that, hey, everybody's messy, everybody is messy, then you start to feel a lot less alone. And
Yeah.
I would just like to, for me and for my children, like, I was in Mexico, not in prison before I came back. But the reason I came back was for my children. My children didn't choose that life, right?
Mm,
Now, if I was on my own and didn't have a wife and a child and then another one on the way, I may have stayed there, right? Like, it would have
yeah.
been a totally different timeline for me. And I just find it so much easier to be honest about everything than to try and hide.
Hmm.
What it really comes down to is that I'm a terrible liar. So to try and hide some massive secret that if you
Yeah.
Google my name, you can go find out for yourself anyway.
Hmm.
Why would I let my children grow up and then they're 13 one day and have their phone and they look up their last name and they find all of this bad news that they knew nothing about? And then
Yeah.
how would they ever trust me again? How would my
Hmm.
children trust me if they found out all of this stuff about me that I've been carrying and never told them? And I guess
Yeah.
as someone who it probably stems from watching my parents' relationship and knowing that, or not knowing rather, that their relationship wasn't great, right? Until dad had a new girlfriend, but mom didn't want to leave home. And you go through 3 years of your high school career with your dad bringing your mom and his lover to your games, right?
Yeah.
And the incessant bullying that that created for me in my high school career. I didn't ask
Mm.
for any of that. I didn't deserve any of that.
Yeah.
So living through that as the child that, my parents probably didn't have a great relationship for years before that happened, but because
Wow.
they weren't honest maybe with each other and they weren't honest with us kids, it just kind of got dropped on me one day where mom's like, I'm leaving, and took off with my two brothers and was only gone for a weekend because she couldn't stand to be without her baby, right? I'm the firstborn and the oldest in my family. That she came back and then sat in that terrible situation and put herself through all of those things for me, right?
Mm.
And now that's something that, like, I don't ever want to be in that situation on either side of it now, right? And that's probably why my relationship with my oldest boy's mother, where it was like, no, we're done. I'm not going through a terrible relationship just because we have a kid together. That's crazy. Um,
Yeah.
we will figure this out, but we ain't going to figure it out together. And obviously, as you can tell by a 12-year long custody battle, I'm in court
Mhm.
twice a year fighting just to see my son because she thinks that she can, oh, well, he doesn't have to contact his dad, or whatever in her head. Not to get into her past or anything, but when you have diagnosed mental health issues and you choose not to medicate or seek help for those, at some point it's not everyone else's fault. And that's
Mm.
kind of where we find ourselves, and constantly returning to that. And boy, I've grown a lot just dealing with that one situation, right?
Yeah. And it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, too, having experienced it firsthand, I imagine that was a lot of pressure to kind of have as a child. Like, my mom is sitting through this really awful situation and she's saying it's, for me, to just kind of, I'm just imagining as a child to kind of have that weight on top of it too. Is that,
Right.
I mean, is
Well,
that a fair
and
statement?
right. Well, and she never said that. I know that's what it
Oh,
was,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
She would never say that. And if my mother's watching this and it gives her some closure to that it's
Mm.
okay. Because my mom and I have never got to talk about this stuff after the fact because it was also terrible. And then she finally divorced my dad after I left for college. And I went to college 5 hours away on the other side of the state from where they were. And I just left. And then I ran away.
Okay.
I was gone for years, right? No
Yeah.
contact. This was kind of before, I mean, cell phones were around, but it's not like it is today. We're talking 2004, 2005. And I just kind of disappeared. And then it
Hmm.
led to years of drug addiction and alcohol abuse and all of these things because I don't know how to process any of this stuff, right? Any of this stuff that I've been burying because outwardly, all of us kids and dad and wife and other gal and her two kids, everybody just has to pretend like it's okay when it's the most screwed up thing I've ever heard of in my life.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
screwed up, right? And nobody admitting that, and even years later, not admitting it is like we talked about my other show, Get Better Together. That's kind of how that show came about because I was like, I have to get this out of me. I have
Hmm.
to get this out for me. And whether it's on the internet and a million people see it, or if it's on my computer in a file that sits there and doesn't get watched by anyone, I have to get it out of me. And
Yeah.
that is what kind of led me on the path that I'm on now, where I'm like, oh no, we're going to share our stuff and you're not going to
Uh-huh.
stop us. You gave this story to me. These two people that made a choice that they were going to be together regardless of who it hurt. Okay, then I'm allowed to talk about that. I'm not talking out of turn. You gave me that story. And
Yeah.
I want my kids to know that, hey, I gave you this story, right? I gave you those first few years of your life where it wasn't great. I did that to you. I'm
Mm.
sorry, right? But also, daddy's done nothing but work his tail off to give you a better life since he got out of prison, right? The
Yeah.
decision to come back from Mexico, knowing full well that as soon as I got to the border, I'm going into handcuffs and I'm going away for up to 15 years, was the charges I was facing. Now, I only
Wow.
ended up doing just over 2 years total, but that was also because of choices that I made. Choices I made in prison to get time cut off, and choices that I made to, pursue a better life for myself after that. This is the story I'm giving to you now, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, heavy
Can we go
conversation today.
Can we actually go back to that though? That decision, because I hear you saying, you when you left, kids were already in the picture. And so I'm curious for you, like what was going on? What was your thought process? Could you walk us through kind of what how did you come to that decision to say, I'm coming back? I know full well what's expected of me. And the minute I hit, my feet on the ground on the other side, but that you made that decision. How did you come to that decision? Was it an easy process? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Well, and it wasn't with my first child, right? Or it wasn't with Mick, who was born in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
When we crossed the border headed south, obviously knew that my wife at the time was pregnant, and that this child was most likely going to be born in Mexico. We had no idea what that was going to look like. Thank God for the Mexican government and all these beautiful people down there that took care of us, because I was a drug addict. I had just been arrested and let out because I was selling a lot of pot. I know for California, that's not a big deal, but for South Dakota, they kind of frown upon it. And I was
Yeah.
like, screw you. I'm not going to jail for weed. This is crazy. I'm going to Mexico. And then once I said it, I had to live it because I don't want to be a liar. And
Mm.
and yeah, it just so happened that my wife at the time, that she knew someone down there. She had grown up in Arizona, and who she calls, her uncle. And they hadn't seen each other in years. But when she called, he answered and said, yeah, our family has a space for you. Come on down. And they kind of made sure that we were taken care of for a full year. But it was over the course of that year where it's like, this isn't your life, right? Like, yes, you can live here, but this isn't the life that you're supposed to be living. It's definitely not the life that your children are supposed to be living. And then so my oldest, or my middle boy, um, he was born in 2015, and then
Okay.
shortly after he was born, got pregnant again. And it was at that time where, knowing what we had gone through with the first pregnancy and everything, that we're not raising to. I mean, we were living in a place with dirt floors. Like, it was very third world Mexico. We weren't in Cancun, right? Like,
Yeah.
we were in Hidalgo, the state of Hidalgo, Mexico, where they don't even see white people, right? Like, we were
Mm.
unicorns. And then I'm down on the square playing Hotel California, and they're like, where'd you get the gringo? We like this guy,
Right.
right? What is going on? I was El Gringo de Tulancingo. That was my stage name.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I loved it, right? And maybe on a
Yeah.
different timeline, had I landed there at 19, 20 years old, I may have never come back. I have such a
Mm.
love for the country of Mexico, for the Mexican people, and for those families that took us in and fed us and housed us and clothed us and did all of the things for us. And it was really looking around and going, these people have nothing, and they are giving freely of themselves to us just to keep
Wow.
us alive. um I owe it to them to go back, because they're all wanting to go to America, right? They're all down there going, like, what are you doing here? Why would you
Mm.
be here? Right? And I'm like, well, my life wasn't really that great up there, and then I'm facing, prison time. It was just going to get worse. But
Yeah.
it humbled me, right? And being humbled, I was able to look at the situation and go, you owe it not only to yourself and your kids, but to all of these people that would honestly do anything to have the opportunity that you have to go back.
Mm,
And even if, I bet if you offered a lot of people the chance to go back and to sit in prison for 2 years, but when you get out, you're an American citizen and you can go work and make money in America, I bet a lot of people would take that.
yeah.
So when you put it in that context, you're like, you
Hmm.
need to go, you need to go do what you need to do. And it's not easy to make that decision to say, I'm going to go and give up and, you know, 1 year to 15. Like I didn't know how long it was going to be. I hadn't been through any kind of court or been offered a deal. It was just, you're going away for an indeterminate amount of time once you cross that border. And it was a big decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can only imagine then, that battle of, like you said, really, it sounds like recognizing your privilege and having some of that humility at the same time, knowing, like you said, that if I go in, I'm going to be physically separated from my family and from these children, and kind of having those two things kind of coexist at the same time. I imagine it wasn't just a walk in the park, if that's a fair statement.
And it's probably something that I'm still processing, right? Because it
Hmm.
was such a large decision that had, ramifications for generations possibly, right?
Yeah.
We could have stayed there. It could have been different, but not like things were real good there during COVID either, right? We could have been
That's
there. I just
Yeah.
came back in 2016. It wasn't that big of a gap of time before the whole world got turned over on its head. How much
Yeah.
harder would our life would have been in that situation? And obviously in 2016, when I'm, coming back across the border, I'm not thinking about any of that, right? But I'm thinking about these two children now, and having already lived through what I lived through, and going, you're going to give them a messed up story. You're giving this life to them. And how dare you, knowing what you've been through, that you would do that to them? They didn't choose this.
Hmm.
You need to do what you need to do to build that better life for your kids and to give them a chance, the same opportunity that you had. And
Yeah.
and then that's what keeps you going, right? Every day for 2 years. My daughter was actually born the day I got moved from jail to prison, right?
Okay.
Not being there to see that, seeing her for the first time, my youngest daughter, through the glass at the jail, right? And talking to them over the phone while I'm in prison. Didn't get a visit from them the entire time because during that time, my now ex-wife, had decided she was just going to move on with her life, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not waiting 2 or 3 years for you to get out and to do this. She had another child while I was in prison that was born, like, just a few months before I got out. So it was obvious that I was coming out and moving into a completely different life. And
Hmm.
we had no idea. It was just the unknown. And I think so many people can be so afraid of that they get paralyzed, that unknown. And
Yeah.
for me, it was the known commodity. It was the known that if we stayed, their life, I had no idea what it was going to look like, but it wasn't going to be what it would be if they were in the United States.
Yeah. That's fair. How could you talk a little bit more about how you were able to get to that decision to own your piece? Because I heard you mention a couple of times, like, that it sounds like you were kind of really intentionally taking stock of your contributions to your children's lives, some of the choices that you made and how it's impacting their lives. Because I feel like so many times that idea of owning it, and especially owning it to your children, which I feel like sometimes parents go, that feels like, well, I'm the parent, I should be kind of in a position of power. And they feel like if I own something like that, if I kind of take responsibility and even come to them, I heard you mention, that at one point you had even, apologized to your kids. That takes a lot. I feel like that's a really scary thing for people to do, especially towards children. And so I'm curious, like, for you, how did you come to that decision to own it? I mean, and to be willing to get vulnerable enough to go into it.
I mean, the therapy that you receive in prison helps, right? Just dealing with my own past and digging into that and going, well, what hurt you, right?
Mm.
And all of it was kind of drug and alcohol related, right? They're trying to heal you, so I'm doing this, but really it was like I only like I don't have an addiction to drugs. I just don't want to feel crappy, right? I'm,
Yes.
I'm using because I didn't have like a drug of choice or like I didn't care whatever you were gonna
Hmm.
give me to numb that whatever or to push and suppress those thoughts that I'm having and those feelings, give it to me. I was all about
Hmm.
it, right? So sobriety in prison and then working some steps and digging into some therapy and just going, yeah, I don't want any of that. I never wanted any of that. I didn't want the story that my dad gave to me.
Yeah.
And then you look at yourself in the mirror as a father and go, hey, your kids didn't want it either, bud.
Mm.
So it was dealing with that, looking in the mirror and going, hey, man, you're not going to be able to hide this, obviously, especially my kids are going to grow up in the internet era. They're going to know who their dad is. And
Yeah.
that the fact that I have an older boy with a mother who hates my guts, that was, you know what I mean? She was going to share
Hmm.
it with him. And then he's going to tell him, like, I didn't want it to come from anyone else, right? If you're
Yeah.
going to hear it, you're going to hear it from me because how else will you trust me and do all the things that I say if you think I'm a liar?
Yeah.
And it's kind
Wow.
of as simple as that. I know it sounds really what's difficult is looking yourself in the mirror and going, you're
Yes.
not going to be a liar. You are going to take accountability for this and you're just going to go live it. And it's not going to make you a worse person to do
Mm.
that. It's not in fact, what we're finding now is that it's actually helping other people to own it yourself and to admit those things to the world, to put it out there for
Yeah.
the world and to go, hey, I'm messy, but I'm
Hmm.
also here. And if I can get here and I can live through all of this stuff that I've lived through, then you can do anything. And if I'm going
Yeah.
to come on here and if I'm going to be on my own podcast and I'm going to be telling all these stories and I'm going to have people look to me or I want people to look at me as an authority or as a leader in whatever, thing that we're pursuing, then I have to be real. I can't show up and then, oh, I got all these skeletons in my closet, right? Like
Hmm.
I just can't do that. And maybe I'm a product of our generation. Maybe I'm only a product of my own experience. But what I'm finding in the world right now, especially in this podcasting universe, is that no, the whole world is just ready for some real talk. Like we're all messed up. We all been through a lot. I mean, just think of it
Yeah.
as, think of the last 5 years on the global scale, just being a human being. We've all been
Yeah.
through a lot of crap. And when we're all
For
just kind
sure.
of opening our eyes and realizing that, like, oh, we went through this big collective thing together. And now it's okay to acknowledge all the little stuff that we've been through too, and those things that hurt us. Because I feel like if you don't acknowledge those, that you're never going to get better. If you
Yeah.
don't go back and shine a light on it and you're not exploring your own demons and exposing those things, then you're never going to get yourself better. And if you're not better yourself, how are you ever going to be able to help anyone? And like we're talking about today is on a much smaller, the family level, but I'm out here in podcasting trying to be somebody to a lot of other people,
Hmm.
right? I don't want anyone to feel like they're getting some fakeness from me. I'm as real as it gets from the moment I wake up to the moment I fall asleep again, and then repeat it every single day. And I think that that accountability starts here, right? It starts with you, starts with me, and it's not something that's going to go away. These problems aren't going to go. Those traumas, they're not going anywhere, right? They
Hmm.
are they are with us. They will, and we know now from research being done that they will express themselves as physical maladies if you don't take care of it, right?
Yeah.
So getting better here and here first, right inside your own heart. That's the first key. And then you can go out and you can heal your family. And then you
Hmm.
can heal your community. And then you can heal the world. So that's really the mission that I'm on. And it starts, like you said, right here at home. And it was really just a couple of easy decisions. I'm going to go back and pay the piper, right? I'm going to go back and face this. I don't know exactly what's out there, but I know I'm probably going away. Well, I would rather go away now while my son is 1 or 2 and my daughter's not born, and them to have no memory of that part of their life themselves and me being able to share that with them later, rather
Yeah.
than wait until they've been living in Mexico for what are you going to do? You're going to live in Mexico for 6 or 7 years and not knowing what's going to happen down there. And then you're going to bring your kids back who have been Mexican residents. And now you're going to bring them back to the United. Like, it just didn't make sense. Right. Like, the longer I'm playing this out in my head, I was like, okay, you had your fun. You did what you said you were going to do. You went to Mexico, but brother, you got to own it, and you got to go back there and deal with it. These kids didn't ask for this.
Yeah. What I love about what you said, and I think you're so spot on in the sense that, on paper, when you're talking about it, that they are kind of easy decisions to make, in the sense that it is kind of you taking a look in the mirror, and the mirror is right there. You're right there. It's not like you're needing necessarily whole leaps and bounds to do it. And I think what's also so important, though, is that I always use the analogy. Do you know those like finger cuffs that we used to have when we were kids, and you put your fingers on either side, and then the instinct, right, is to pull away. And I feel like that's such like a good representation of many people's instincts, is when you go into something that's a little bit sticky, that's a little bit difficult, the instinct oftentimes is like, let me pull away from this. Let me get away as far and as fast as possible. But just like those finger cuffs, when you do that, it just gets tighter and you're still carrying it around. So maybe, you can't see it, it's not right at the top of mind or in the forefront, but it's still there. It's still kind of fused to you. And up until you make the decision to kind of come towards it, which, that's how you get out of those finger cuffs, is you have to come a little bit closer to the other finger. That's when, like you said, we're able to kind of consciously, intentionally make those decisions to look at ourselves in the mirror and to start making different choices. And that it is just like a one day at a time, a constant minutely decision to continue to make those choices, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's just choices, right? Choices got me into that mess, and choices got me out. And I just had to start making better choices, right? And I think as parents, we're all very aware that the choices we make have effects on our children, where maybe, my own father wasn't aware of that, right? And wasn't aware that the choices that you're making right now to do these things or whatever, or even my mother's choice, and not to put any blame on her, but her choice to come back and to stay and to live through that situation, not only as herself, but not giving us children an out. If mom would have left, and granted, I didn't storm out the door with her, maybe after being gone for a few months because she wasn't sharing, hey, I'm leaving your father, right? She wasn't having a conversation with me. She's just like, I'm going to auntie's house. And I'm like, screw you, man. Like, we just moved from there to out here. I just finally make all these friends, and now you want to drag me right back to there, and I got to do, like, no, I didn't. I was 12. No, I don't want to do that again. But I'm 12. And you're not being fully honest with me. If you would have explained everything or had just stayed gone, maybe at some point I come around, right? But that wasn't the life that I got, right? And it wasn't because of my own choosing.
Yeah.
And how dare I then do that to my own children, right? Like, this accountability is how we break generational curses, right? Taking your own accountability.
Trauma. Yes, for sure. And I think that's so important because, like you said, it's those choices, but even not making a choice in itself is making a choice to not make a choice. And I think that's sometimes where people be like, oh, well, I didn't decide. Well, by not making a choice, we are still making a choice, even if maybe you're not quite ready to own it, like you said. It's still a choice.
Yeah. And accountability is hard, right? And for me, one of the life-changing moments when I was in prison was, so I had kind of I had charges out of multiple counties. So they sent me to jail here. I was there for 4 months, kind of going through trial and all of that stuff. Not trial, but just court. And, finally took a deal. And I thought I was going from the one county to the other one. Well, they loaded me up and sent me to prison. And I was like, hey, like, I just came from over there, and like,
Yeah.
why didn't you just take me there? Oh, that's not how we're gonna wait for you to get out. And then and I was like, no, that's why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. So I had to write letters to the DAs and all these people to get them to move my stuff along. Well, when I got to the other county, they're like, hey, we got a deal worked out with the attorneys. You're out. I was getting out in April of this was like 2017, right? I was like, sweet, let's go. And then got to sentencing, and the judge is just like, yeah, no, wait, no. No, he's like, you sold 100 pounds of pot over the course of the last year in my county. You can go screw yourself, big guy. And you're going to prison for a while.
Yeah.
And they sentenced me to like 6 years or something with a little bit suspended. So I'm walking in to this courtroom that day, like, go give him the little spiel. And, oh, I accept responsibility for my actions, da, da, da. See you in April. And yeah, then you get a date that's 3 more years out in the future with none of the time. I didn't get credit for any of the 8 months I had already been in from this judge. So all
Mm.
that time that I just sat and spent was worth absolutely nothing, was worth nothing now. And it was that humbled again
Yeah. Right.
real quick, right? Yeah, I've never had my heart sink like that. And it made me commit even harder at that point. And thank God that I didn't, right? Because I would have never changed my ways. I would have never met my wife because she
Hmm.
wasn't, it would have changed my entire timeline, right? So I don't begrudge the judge for what he did. I don't begrudge the attorneys for, kind of being that. I ended up getting a sentence modification, which shortened the back end of my sentence a little bit because I got a new judge. Thank God that other one had retired. But I was already doing things to better my life. And the new judge with a new attorney was able to see that and to give me a little bit of grace, which I didn't get. It's not God's grace that I got. It was human grace that said, hey, buddy, we see you. You're doing the right things now. We're gonna give you another year of spending with your kids to you and talk about a gift.
Wow. Yeah. And speaking of that, I know you mentioned that like your daughter that you didn't get to be present for some of those, and I imagine there were milestones that you missed in your kid's life. And I would love to know if you're okay kind of chatting about the dad side of things, of what it's like when you miss those things. Like what's the thought process? What was going on for you in those moments when you're kind of missing out on some of those things?
Yeah, I didn't see any of my kids take their first steps, right?
Yeah.
I missed all of that. I missed all of that baby time, holding them. My middle boy, Mick, which is funny because biologically he's not, I mean, he's my son. We don't talk like that here. All of the kids know that they're half brothers and sisters, and that, blood isn't what makes us family. Right.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with it. It's a little bit of genetic code. It's all good. We're family because we're committed to each other. Right.
Hmm.
And my wife is your mother because she committed at 22 years old to raising you kids. And
Yeah.
that, yeah, it's going to eat at me my whole life.
Mm.
And I thank God that I have an opportunity with my current wife that, we've obviously talked about children in our future. She's going to school right now, and our life is a little crazy, but a few years from now, where we're talking about, not starting another family, but adding to this family and adding
Yeah.
our own child, and thinking about finally getting to be and have that the Leave It to Beaver family moment, right? Where
Mm.
maybe all of that was gone, and it's not that it's going to be perfect, but that we're able to bring this child into this world together, and to kind of experience what so many other people experience with their first child, right? Because it will be my wife's first, physically her blood, and just seeing her with our cat who we got back in October. She's gonna be such a good mom, right? And not that she's not a good mom to our kids, but it's different. And seeing her with the cat was like, oh, you're different. Seeing her with her nieces is, you're going to be different with
Yeah.
our own child. And I'm going to be different. All of my children that we have now, these three were all born under duress, under
Mm.
stress, under all of these really bad situations. And that we're building a life now to where, you know, our youngest child will probably have more than one more too. I told her our luck is we'll talk about having one more and then you'll have triplets or something crazy.
Right.
But you know, that building a life that's conducive to this child having a blessed and the perfect life, right? Not that
Mm,
it's perfect by any means, but closer to what most other kids get to grow up in than what my
yeah.
three current children have been raised in.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so as we close, one of the questions I love to ask my guests, and hopefully, are you familiar with Back to the Future? Are you Back to the Future kid?
Oh yeah.
Okay, okay. So same minds. If you had access to a DeLorean, is there a particular age that you would want to go back to for yourself and offer yourself not to change things, but offer yourself some words or maybe even just a hug? What age would you go back to, and what would you offer to little Bubba?
You're gonna make it. I know it hurts, right? And I would have to go back to sometime between 13, 14 years old when everything with my dad and his new lover, current wife, they're still together. So we get to relive that all the time. That's really fun. Um, and to just be like, you're gonna make it, right? It's gonna
Hmm.
be okay. And not that it's gonna be easy. It's gonna suck. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's okay because it's going to make you someone who can pull other people out from their own stuff and to give some perspective. And honestly, the life that I've lived has made me into the podcaster that I am now. The reason I'm good at what I do is because one, I'm unafraid to share about myself, which gets other
Yeah.
people to open up, right? And two, I've got more perspective than you could probably have an entire gym full of people that couldn't give you all the different perspectives that I'm able to twist around and to relate to people. So, yeah, buddy,
Hmm.
it's going to suck. It's not going to be easy. You probably don't need to do as many drugs as you're going to do, but you're going to make it. And I think
Hmm.
having made it, that's still the same fuel that gets me up every day is that we're making it. And now we get to
Yeah.
be a beacon and a lighthouse for other people that are inevitably going through maybe not my same situation, but going through their own stuff. And they feel
Hmm.
alone right now and they feel like it's never going to end and it's never going to get better. And I want to be the person that goes, it will. It will. And I'm not
Yeah.
comparing my trauma to your trauma, but it does get better, but it starts with personal accountability. It starts inside of you to say, I'm going to make better choices. Yes, these things happen to me. What now?
Yeah. I love that. Gosh, okay, Bubba, thank you so much for being willing to join us, to chat with us so really and unfiltered. Really isn't really a word, but I'm going to make it one. Um, and I'm so excited. So I've got all of my stuff in my crock pot and it's all mixed up. How long do you normally let this stew for?
So we usually crank it on high to let it get cooking for like 2 hours. And then we'll set
Okay.
it down to low and let that thing simmer for another, 3, 4 hours so that it's ready for supper. I'm always dipping in for a little lunch. We'll usually get it going in the morning. So as soon as it's warm, my wife likes it with noodles. She grew up where they put macaroni noodles in. So
Okay.
I prefer my chili with cheese and just in a bowl and maybe with some crackers or chips. So I'm always dipping in early and grabbing a bowl for lunch. But then by supper time, it's just and then it's even better on day two.
Oh, yum. Okay. I will have it. It will be simmering all day. I'm sure it'll fill the house with lots of yummy smells. So excited. For anybody who is interested in connecting with you and any services that you're wanting to plug, this is our shameless plug section. So please plug away.
I feel like the whole episode was a shameless plug. I have
We'll
I
own it.
have the scene projects is my podcast network. We are empowering creators to do more of that. We're trying to figure out the business side for podcasters so that they don't have to worry about, if they want to turn it into something that's a true business and not just a hobby, that we can provide some framework for that. You can find all of the information at thesceneprojects.com. I know it's on the screen on how to spell everything there. And yeah, just start there, join the email list and get into our world. And then from there, you'll get introduced to some of my music. We didn't talk about much about my music career besides being the gringo, but yeah, you'll find out more about me and more about, what we're doing and what we're going to continue to do. We do all kinds of live events during the year. How I started podcasting was to support my music community. So you'll find a lot of interviews with independent music artists, but also
Okay.
now a lot of podcasters and other business owners, and really just anyone that I find, interesting, or anybody that's got some skeletons in their closet they're trying to clear out. They can come on one of our shows. We mentioned Get Better Together Project. That's why it's the Scene Projects, is because each one is similar to this show, is a project of its own. And each one kind of serves a different purpose. But we're just trying to pull back the veil, right? People, especially in our generation, and that's most of our listeners are in that 25 to 44 range. We've all been through a lot. You've been through a lot. And
Yeah.
we just want to be able to give you a safe space to talk about it and to hopefully walk away feeling a little bit better than you did, an hour ago.
Wonderful. I love that. And as always, everyone will have all of those links down in our show notes to check that out. Thank you again, Bubba, for being willing to come on to chat with me today. I so appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure to come back next time. We'll see you then. If you or anyone that you know is struggling with any of the topics that we discussed in today's episode, make sure to check out our show notes for support and resources. You can get help. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of The Real Family Eats. If you're a parent ready to share your real-life parenting story, make sure to reach out to us in our website found in the show notes. And that goes for today's recipe, social medias, support, and resources. All of that can be found in our show notes. So make sure to check them out. And make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and stay up to date on all things The Real Family Eats. I hope you'll join us next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. Enjoy your eats.